I'm going to be honest and say to you, Rich, this is going to be not difficult, but you kind of caught me off guard with that coming from the communication perspective. But I'm going to go probably right back to the start in terms of what you mentioned in terms of the strong suit. I'm going to go back through probably a big proportion of my life because I think it's very I can't think of the words, but in terms of where I wrote even when we are doing the live, some adversity in terms of where I think it's some of the underlying issues are. If we go back to when I was a child, well, most people will know. Obviously, you mentioned it even in the recording about the disability. I know most people would probably have seen it or know that I've got a disability, but that notion of something is wrong. I'm trying to think how to word it. I wouldn't perceive it as I coin it as not being adverse in that situation because thinking, well, I've grown up with it. Well, I still have it, which is a bit silly to thing to say. Um, so why would I know any different? But then you think on the other hand, well, it wasn't until I was about how old was I? About 15 or 16 before I saw somebody with a similar disability to myself. So you're thinking, well, you perceive yourself as close as able-bodied as can be. The language you use around that is similar. Obviously, all my friends growing up were able-bodied, so I know I was near enough able-bodied as I could be, but there was obviously limitations to certain things I couldn't do or would have to take time and come up with an adaptation to be able to do it. Okay, that's an adverse situation. I think in terms of maybe where I've maybe struggled with that is probably nursery school, and this is only through hearsay from my parents speaking now of being, I wouldn't coin it as held back, but not being able to go up with your peers because they perceive you might get, well, I won't say bullied, but I'm trying to think how old I've been, like 4 or 5 years old. So you think, well, it's not bullying then. Uh, and actually be picked on because of the disability. And then I think the conversation I have had with my father over the subject, and I have no recollection as one whatsoever. He said it was the shoe was on the other foot. I picked on the other kids. So you're thinking, well, you having this notion of James is going to be picked on because of his disability. Thinking, well, I picked on somebody's quote unquote smaller than me. I've got no remember because they were looking at my family member through a screen, thinking, well, I'll take his word for it, but I don't remember doing it. Okay, it's 20, well, almost 30 years ago. So he said it happened. It obviously happened. I think the latter point, when you mentioned that preteen section, 8 to 14, there's probably a multitude of ones, situations where I can think of. Um, Obviously, breaking a prosthetic leg almost on a weekly basis. I know teachers said, "Oh, I always had a smile on my face." You're thinking, "Oh, I bet towards the end of primary school, I was very, very pissed." You think, "Oh, for fuck's sake, it's happened again." Uh, and from that perspective, you're thinking, "Well, I probably didn't have the normal, well, quote unquote, normal education." I know it's probably as normal as I'm going to get compared to yours, Rich, but not being able to always be in there Monday to Friday because of the likelihood that leg is going to fail me. So I think possibly that's a situation of adversity I've not really been forgiving of myself and be uh, that. way inclined to say, well, it happened. Okay. It is a component that I had back then was, well, living in Belgium. They did stuff very adverse, very adaptable to situations. It was very ingenuitive, but you talk to a prosthetist over in this country, you're thinking, whoa, we're not allowed to do that by law, probably because of those things. Because I had a hip joint and an elbow joint for a knee joint. So those biomechanically, as most of you obviously know, obviously can't take body weight. And I don't weigh anywhere near what I do now. So I think that would be one. I think probably going into secondary school, I think how old would I have been? We start slightly later. So I'd have been 12, 13, being picked on from that perspective. And it probably was a sense of bullying in retrospect, because you were perceived as a weaker individual, and that's probably played on me for a number of years. You're thinking, well, that's maybe why in later life and in the sporting sense, I probably had that attitude of, well, if you tell me no, I'm going to go out there and prove you wrong. It's probably that mentality of, that's probably where it stems from, because you've been told, I think even from a teacher perspective, you're not going to amount to anything, because I got mixed up in the wrong, well, I won't say the wrong crowd, but the ones who weren't doing as well academically. So, okay, you're one of them. We're going to label you as that. You've got a disability as well. So it was that kind of old school approach academically. It's like, we're going to get the whip out and kind of badger it with you. So I think I did get a level of score with that PE teacher, because he challenged me to a race in swimming, and I battered him. So that was quite nice. You think you are going to, well, it was in one of my better disciplines as well, in butterfly, and well, if anybody's tried it, it's quite technically difficult stroke, and that's probably one time, other than probably elite sport, I've used my upper body strength to my advantage, and it was quite nice to bring him down a peg or two, and I did gain a little bit of respect. But you're thinking subconsciously, well, what has that done to me in terms of that belittlement? You're thinking, well, and also with probably the educational system on continental Europe, you don't necessarily get to go from, how would I word this? Get to go up a year if you don't pass. So I had to do, if my memory serves me right, an extra year in secondary school. So I didn't graduate till I was actually 19, school, as opposed to most of my peers would have finished at 18. So that's an extra year. So I think it did dent my confidence academically, but that's probably why my family had enough. When you finally finish that, oh God, what year would that be? For us, it would be year 8, but I would have been slightly older. So it might be year 9 in the UK. My mum pulled me out of the Belgian school, put me in the American system, and their education is like polar opposite. You're all wonderful. You want to put in that extra work, by all means do. And I strived in that education, and probably helped build the confidence in the classroom. The sport confidence is probably, it's never really struggled anyway, and probably until later life I've not been, because of myself, willing to put in the work, and I'll touch upon this a little bit later in the video. So I think those, gosh, what would that be, 3-4 components just there would be would be probably some of the causes to where I'm at now. The last one, as in young adult, I'm not on my own. I think this has happened to me in later life than 18 to 24, Rich. I think for me, I think it's come at a time now. I'd retired from elite sport, and because you are, I won't say mollycoddled, because that's nowhere near anything to probably what an academy player or a football player is. But because I was in that bubble, I had access to doctors, physios, nutritionists, who am I forgetting? Psychologists if I needed to. And also I was at university at the same time. I have those on my doorstep. So I have that. If I choose to use it, I can do. And I probably underutilized a lot of those things. And that's somewhat of a regret. I can't change the past now, so I kind of accept that. But it's not until those issues with sciatica a couple of years ago, the mental health more recently, you're thinking, yeah, I am alone. But I think it's taken seeking out help from others, not from a sympathetic point of view, but getting that helping hand and showing, excuse me, where I'm at now, where I've come from, related to any facet of life, be it nutritional fitness. Well, okay, you're going to be historically at, and you mentioned it a couple of days ago, with the, oh gosh, I can't think of what it's called. I have to flip through my diary. The uninformed optimism and things like that. Whereas you will start off like that even on your journey to a result. I think when you hit rock bottom, you know where you're at. You're like stage 4, stage 3 or 4, if I remember serving right. When I did it, because I did a post on it before the new year. And in terms of what it's taken hitting rock bottom to see that, in terms of, well, you don't have that good quote unquote like a safety blanket, because I would get fixed, so to speak, within, I don't know, worst case scenario, 24 hours, be able to see some sort of professional. Whereas you're thinking, now that I'm reliant on either going private and spending my hard-earned cash, which I'm quite all right with doing, or relying on the NHS and it's taking a little bit longer to get things done, that's quite scary at times. You're thinking, I am alone. But then speaking to my father more recently, who is a retired, see if I can get this right, clinical psychologist, he's going to tell me point blank, well, what I don't want to hear, in terms of, the tough love. Yeah, I'm going to be there for you as a father, but you need to pull yourself together a little bit as well and say, well, you aren't alone. I know there's times there's been things of the professional I've seen have said that as well, but I think it's coming from a family member, and because I alluded to this earlier, he's not been in my life from a younger age perspective, and having that influence on me from a male role model perspective growing up. Okay, I know who he is. I know what he looks like, so I don't have daddy issues from that perspective. But I think there is a little bit of resentment, because you're thinking, well, he's not been there for me for a majority of my life. Okay, I would have spoken to him on the phone, but because I think growing up, you don't have that bond, it's quite difficult to speak over the phone. I think nowadays, okay, I'm in my 30s, it's not difficult to have a conversation, and I probably should do as you mentioned, Rich, have it out with him and say, well, this, I have a problem with this. Now that I'm adult, and this is my voice and my opinion, and say, well, you can see why my mother doesn't speak to you because of what you did. So I'm not going to go into too many details, but that's where I'm. It's not trying to hold a grudge, but not wanting to turn out. Well, I haven't, but you're thinking, well, there is qualities that he has that I've obviously emulate, but there's obviously the qualities that from having multiple children with different women, you're thinking, well, I don't want to turn out like that, but that's a resentment. So he's thinking, he may have had his multiple reasons as to why he did it, but until I have that conversation, I won't know. And that's probably where I'm at in terms of with my opening up. Yeah, I think on the last one I'll mention, this one's probably going to be a long one for me, but it's got a lot of the chest. You talked about obviously people coming from a privileged background and having that comfortable lifestyle. Well, I wouldn't say I was privileged. I came from not well-to-do background, but middle class, if you're going to coin that thing. My mother, even though a single parent, had a very good job. So, obviously, not having my father in the picture, I grew up in how would I word this? Female-oriented environment. So, my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother. Did I get spoiled rotten? Probably yes when I was younger. Nowadays, no. But that sense of being comfortable, I can probably see why I have the sense of being shy. That quiz actually surprised me in terms of I thought I'd be more introverted than I actually am. But I won't. I'll take it with a pinch of salt because it's an assessment. How I answered it might vary. If I did it today as opposed to yesterday, or if I did it tomorrow, it might change. But trying to not go off on a tangent, I think that is maybe what has set up some of the traits that I give off is because of that. And I think even coming back home after sport has not helped because I've just gone back into, I won't say my shell, but I've come back to a comfortable environment. I don't have to quote unquote fight for my existence, my survival, which on the other hand in sport to some degree I did on a daily basis because I could be cut at any given moment if I took my foot off the gas. So I think from that perspective, I've realized that. So I need to push on with this boot camp and push on with business. And then, as we put it, probably like as a teen, like an 18-year-old, fly the nest again because I did leave at 18, came back because of sport, because I had nowhere to live. I've now become too comfortable, but I can see that you're thinking, well, a lot of the things that you're doing, you are to a certain extent taking advantage. So I don't like where I'm at the moment. So it's trying to strive to become better as a person, to not do that and not take advantage of other family members and push forward, and then maybe look to move to a different part of the country. It doesn't have to be okay. I could probably look at different facets of where I was living, be in Swansea, London. I probably wasn't always happy then, but I take some scope from doing some of the meditation things, well, you're never 100% happy. So from that perspective, it's like, well, okay, that's going to be content, but maybe I need to leave the area because it's associated with retirement, leisure and tourism. So it is pretty much dead as a town. 6 months of the year. Maybe I need to go to somewhere that is, well, not more lively, but more is happening. So I don't know, Manchester, um, London if I have to, because I've lived down there before, and be very much of that. So that's obviously my, I won't say long-winded, but that's me communicating. And I think probably most of you can relate to some of those things. And obviously, I'd love to hear what you think of it.